That volume isn't working either. It usually says out loud it's recording, and now it didn't say it out loud. Okay, but you hear me, right? Okay.
Yes.
So, Erev Tov, what we've done in the last couple of shiurim on this topic of thank you, Etta, does Judaism encourage diversity, was to assume that we are pretty, generally speaking, it would be very difficult for any of us to think that, there's no room for diversity and so on. But I wanted to start off with balancing that diversity and showing that there is the necessity of a framework within Judaism. We brought some sources about how in the beginning there weren't many disagreements, disputes, machlokot, either because, as the Rambam said, when people think logically, they reach a logical conclusion and that they should reach the same conclusions, and only Talmidim who did not study properly caused that to deteriorate. Or even if we take it as its simple meaning, as we saw that in the time of the Sanhedrin, there was an authoritative high court, the Sanhedrin in Beit HaMikdash, and any disputes that were in lower courts were brought there, and they made a decision, and everyone had to adhere to that decision. So the disputes were not ongoing, as the Rambam says. They didn't prolong. And once the Mikdash was destroyed and the Sanhedrin wasn't there anymore, then the disputes went on for longer times. There were more disputes. Things were not decided clearly. We're going to go back to one aspect of that source again tonight, but I'd like to start off with strengthening another aspect of this issue, and then to start balancing and showing the side of in being in favor or encouraging diversity, and to try and keep a balance between the two ideals. So here we go, sharing the screen. Where are we? Here. Okay, we are over here. Yes, we are in the Pasuk in Dvarim, Perek Yud Zayin. I have the Psukim in English. Okay. So the Psukim in Parashat Shoftim and Sefer Dvarim say, if a matter eludes you in judgment, meaning there is something that the deciders of halakha, the Paskei halakha, the Beit Din, doesn't have an answer to. Someone comes with a question, and they don't have an answer, or maybe even there's a dispute about the answer, then words of dispute in your cities, then you shall rise and go up to the place the Lord your God chooses. In Sefer Dvarim, it appears many times, Hamakom asher yivchar Adonai, the place that Hashem chooses to build, for us to build Beit HaMikdash. And the Sanhedrin, the high court of the Sanhedrin, there were 3 levels of Sanhedrin there on Har HaBayit, at the entrance to Har HaBayit, at the entrance to the court of Beit HaMikdash, and inside Beit HaMikdash, always going up on the level of how higher up this court is. The highest court was actually in Beit HaMikdash, in a certain, what is it called? Lishka, in a certain office. It's not an office, it's a larger room, but in a certain section in Beit HaMikdash. So you go up to the place of the Mikdash, and you shall come to the Levitic Kohanim. In the Pasuk in Hebrew, it says, El Kohanim Alviyim, and to the judge who will be in those days. And you shall inquire, and they will tell you the words of judgment. So they give you a halachic decision. We described this occurrence in the Braita and the Gemara in the Rambam a few weeks ago in the first shiur. And then the Torah says, according to the law that they instruct you, and according to the judgment that they say to you, you shall do, you shall not divert from the word they tell you, either right or left. In Hebrew, lo tasur min hadavar asher yagidu lecha yamin u'shmol. You are not allowed to divert from their decision, from their instruction, either right or left. It seems obvious what is the reason of this mitzvah. But wait a minute, before we say it's obvious, let's have people speak up or write on the chat. What do you think is the reason why we have this law in the Torah, this halakha?
Opinion, second.
that people will not start to shop for different opinions.
Why is it a problem if there's opinion shopping? What do you mean by opinion shopping?
Start to go to different rabbis.
Why would a person go to different rabbis?
To get the own.
Because they want to do what's comfortable for them. That's called Mikulei Beit Shammai and Mikulei Beit Hillel. You can have disagreements between different rabbis. Some are more stringent and some are more lenient. So you always look for the lenient view. That's what you mean by opinion shopping. And like you can do that on Google today. You can look something up on Google and you find different opinions. You can always take the more lenient opinion. So about this, the Gemara says that you can choose if you want to follow Beit Shammai or Beit Hillel, if you want to Rabbi A or Rabbi B, that's legitimate. But to follow always the leniencies, the Gemara actually says Rasha. Rasha, how would you translate Rasha in English? Russia. Bad person. Evil person. Rasha, not in the sense that he's bad to other people. Between him and his obedience of Hashem, he is Rasha. Okay, so I would say, even though the Gemara says he's a Rasha, I would say it's certainly not ideal. He's not trying to, he's not striving, he's not trying to elevate himself, reach higher spiritual levels. He's always accepting what is easier for him. It doesn't mean that being lenient is always less, or that being lenient is always a lower level spiritually. But if that's what you're always doing, it seems to be just an easy way out all the time. But I have to comment. Yes, Eliezer?
Hello?
One second. I just have to say about the idea of leniencies that it's not out. It's staying within, without transgressing the law, the halakha, but always taking the easiest way. So that's one thing that would be wrong if we don't accept one central authority. Eliezer, for your question, in the psukim, the Levitic Kohanim means the Kohanim from Shevet Levi. That's all. It's not. It doesn't have any special meaning. Yeah. But they're called a Kohanim Bnei Levi. From Shevet Levi, those who are Kohanim. I don't know if I haven't actually checked extensively, but I'm not aware of anyone as a commentator who says that there's anything specifically important about this terminology. I will mention, and not get into it now, that you see here that the judges can be Kohanim or a judge who is not a Kohen, because you say to the Levitic Kohanim and to the judge who will be in those days. They're both in the Beit Din. So you have judges who are Kohanim, or you have Kohanim who are not judges. What are they doing here, the Kohanim? If it would say just to the judges, I would understand. These are the judges in the Beit Din. Why mention the Kohanim here? What do Kohanim have to do with judges in the Sanhedrin? There are those who commented on this. It's fascinating. Maybe it will be appropriate on a different topic, a different time, but we won't get into it right now. And because I do know of commentaries who thought that was an important issue, and I don't remember anyone commenting as an important issue on the Levitic Kohanim, I don't think it's of any unusual interest right now.
Well, there is something, perhaps, because there's presumably something like court, right?
Yeah.
And that court, or are there two courts? One with the Levitic Kohanim and the others with these other judges.
Okay, so that's the question of the duality of Kohanim and judges. Are there two different courts, or is it the same court? And why mention judges? I understand. Why mention Kohanim here? If you're coming to bring a sacrifice on the altar in Beit HaMikdash, I understand you need the Kohanim. What would judges be doing in that pasuk? If you're coming to the court, I understand why you're mentioning judges. Why mention Kohanim? So there are interpretations that some of the judges are Kohanim because Kohanim are Torah teachers. Kohanim are not supposed to be people who sit in the Mikdash and perform the what is it called? The rituals in Beit HaMikdash. They're supposed to be people who learn Torah and teach Torah. So naturally there would be some Kohanim in the court. Some of the judges would be Kohanim. But it seems to be hinting to something more spiritual than that, more meaningful than that. But it's not, that's not the topic right now, so I don't want to expand on that. But the Levitic Kohanim, I don't think is of any unusual value right now. But going back to the question, what do you think? What is the reason why the Torah gives an instruction like this? You have to follow their law. You shall not divert from the word. They tell you either right or left. So one option is because you're going to go shopping for leniencies. What else?
So just back to the term Russia in this case, maybe it's referring to somebody with just a weak character.
Yeah,
They're
yeah,
always looking for the.
yeah, right. Which is, I was saying, it's taking the easy way out, but it's not out. It remains within, and yet it's being condemned by the rabbis. Meaning, I'll put it bluntly, when I say a halacha in shul, I try to mention more where there are more lenient opinions and more stringent opinions. Sometimes there aren't. This is the one rule, and there's no other way about it. But if there are different opinions, I try to mention them. So there is someone, no name, I'm not going to mention any names. There is someone who said to me once, "Oh, he was the kind of making fun of it." He said, "When you say lenient positions, that's always the one I'm going to take." So I didn't tell him, "You're a Russia," but I did say to him, "I'm very happy to hear that." Because what you're saying is not, I was stringent until now. Now I'm being lenient because you told me there's a lenient opinion. What you're saying is, I didn't know that there was such a halakha. I'm going to take the lenient opinion. Good. We're moving forward, we're moving up, not moving down. But if you know of halachot and you know of different opinions and you always take the lenient opinion, then you're being, what was the term you used? Weak of character. You're not making an honest effort to do your best. So it's not the worst thing in the world. It's not absolutely illegitimate, but it's not the right thing to do. Within halakha, there is one more instruction about that. If you ask a rabbi a question, you can't then say, "I don't like your answer," and go to another rabbi. It's like asking mother and asking father, Abba says no, I'll ask Ima, kind of thing. That you can't do. But you can consult with the rabbi and say, "Listen, I want to teach me about the issue. I want to hear if there are different opinions. I'm not coming for a psak. Don't give me an instruction. Give me the opinion. Teach me." But if you've asked for a psak and you got one, you can't then go into someone else and say, "I want a different psak." Or I have a rabbi friend who said once, we were at a certain gathering, and he said, I had someone ask me a question, halacha question. He said, "I found on Google 3 different opinions. What should I do?" They said, "I will answer you only if you'll do what I say. Otherwise, you'll just have 4 opinions instead of 3. And one of the interesting world we're at today, one of the women at the gathering was a woman studying for Rabbanut. She's and since then she's completed her Rabbanut studies, Orthodox Rabbanit. Her husband was there, and he's a doctor, and he said, "You rabbis think you're the only ones? We got the same thing. Person comes for me to treat him. He's looked up on Google and seen the different opinions. I say to him, I'm willing to treat you, but you have to do what I say. Otherwise, so you have a lot of opinions. I can't take responsibility for that." So that's interesting. But I think there's another reason why the Torah says you have to accept. What do you think?
Are you coming to the court for advice, or are you coming to the court for judgment?
That's true. We're coming to the court for judgment. And as you see, if you notice in the psukim, there were words of dispute in your cities. There's a dispute about it. And then it comes to the high court. And if we don't accept their judgment, the disputes are not going to be solved. That's what the Rambam was talking about, that when there was the Sanhedrin in Beit HaMikdash, even if there were disagreements, they weren't prolonged because there was a decision, and the society, Jewish society, accepted that decision. And so the disputes were solved in that way.
So if you refuse to accept the decision, maybe you're at the heart of it, challenging the authority.
So one aspect of it is if you don't accept it, you're creating a dispute. But Michael is bringing up something else, where if you don't accept it, you're actually challenging the authority of the Beit Din. Now, I didn't bring the psukim, the next psukim. One of the next 2 psukim later, two psukim later, the Torah will say that if there is a person who doesn't accept, who intentionally does not accept the decision of the court, he actually is punishable by death. But the rabbis in the oral Torah understand this to be talking about a judge of the Sanhedrin, or someone who has the capabilities has the knowledge and the authority to be a judge in the Sanhedrin. If he not, this was very interesting. I taught this morning. It's a Gemara in Masechet Sanhedrin. And if he, and then the Gemara says, if he disagrees, so sorry, I was teaching this morning, and a group of women here in Matan, and one of the women was very shocked because you're saying if anyone disagrees, we kill him. I said, no, that's not what the Gemara is saying, not what the Mishnah, not what the Psukim are saying. If you look in the Halacha, the Mishnah says explicitly, if he goes back and studies and interprets and teaches the way he thinks, he's not punishable. It's positive, it's in the middle, but it's not punishable. If he gives instructions to someone according to his opinion, then he's punishable. Meaning he's going against the decision of the court. He's telling someone, giving someone an instruction to act not according to what we had a dispute. My friends here in the court, in the local court, disagreed with me. We went up to the high court in Yerushalayim. They give a decision, and we go back to the city, and I continue giving people instructions the way I think against what the Sanhedrin decided. That's punishable. There you are, you're more than challenging. You're actually creating a rebellion against. Yeah, you're creating a rebellion against the authority. So that's what it's about. It's not about discussing. It's not about having different opinions. One day we may bring the Mishnah in Masechet Eduyot that asks, you look in the Mishnah and you'll see that they bring different opinions. Now the ruling of halacha is halacha kerabim. The halacha will be according to the majority. The majority opinion. So the Mishnah itself asks, so why do we bring the minority opinion? If the majority opinion is the halacha, why does the Mishnah bring the majority opinion and the minority opinion? One reason could be that it's interesting to hear the discussion and how they reached the decision, but that's not what the Mishnah says. The Mishnah says there are certain times where you might need the minority opinion in a certain situation. So sometimes the minority opinion was rejected, but is still acceptable in other situations. And also because maybe one day, minority will become
the majority.
Things can change. So we don't erase the minority opinion and hide the fact that there was such an opinion. The halacha is decided according to the majority opinion, and that obligates us, at least in the time of the Sanhedrin. But we don't hide or we don't keep it secret that there was a minority opinion, and you can study, you can become a knowledgeable Talmid Chacham, and you can go to the Beit Din and you can argue and you can convince a few tens of Dayanim in the Beit Din, and the decision can be changed. So on the one hand, there's room. This very same halacha is showing us limitations of diversity, but also showing us where there is room for diversity. So the limitation of diversity is in the decision making, in the adherence to a high authority that's making a decision for everyone. It doesn't mean that you can't have different opinions, and you can continue raising these opinions, teaching them, trying to convince. You can't give instructions against what has been decided by the highest authority of Jewish law in Am Yisrael. Okay, that's giving us a kind of part of the picture.
It's a statement that the decision is a decision because you have to come to a decision, otherwise everybody does what they want.
Mm-hmm.
But there's nuance in the decision.
Yes.
That leads to diversity.
So there's nuance in the discussion. The discussion is legitimate. The argument is legitimate. The giving different instructions than the highest authority is not legitimate. But that's what I'm saying. That's a limitation. But the opinions themselves can be diverse. Yes. Yes.
In the U.S. Supreme Court, some of the greatest justices were known for their minority opinions. And in other words, showing that, as to say that there's some avenue for proceeding in another direction, which 20 years later was become.
Yeah. I'll mention another halacha once we've mentioned this, and that is that in Dinei Nefashot, in rulings about for which if the Beit Din, the Sanhedrin find the accused, how would you say, the ne'esham, the accused, is there another term? They would find him guilty. then if all the judges in the Sanhedrin immediately said he's guilty, then he's acquitted. Because there has to be a discussion. There has to be what's called in Israel today the Ipcha Mistabra, which they said, 50 years ago, going back to where we are now, 50 years ago, when we had the terrible misunderstanding, misconception of the intelligence that didn't understand that the Egyptians and Syrians were going to war. After that they said you have to have an intelligence and ipcha mistabra. Ipcha mistabra is Aramaic. It means thinking opposite. You have to have in the intelligence work, you have to have someone who goes against the going opinion, because we have to be ready to check. Wait a minute, is that a conception, a misconception? Is it, let's give room for opposite, opposing opinions. And now, 50 years later, part of what happened now is they were saying there wasn't that. The Ipcha Mistabra wasn't working. Everybody was accepting something. There were soldiers raising claims against this conception, but nobody was taking the active role. Nobody high-ranking was taking the active role of the Ipcha Mistabra, so there wasn't anyone to challenge the going opinion. So even when they got the clear signs that something was about to happen, everybody was saying, nah, it's not going to happen. So the same thing in Beit Din, in Sanhedrin. If everyone accepts one thing and there's no argument about it, we can't make a decision. We can't make a judgment, because there has to be some challenging and thinking and arguing about it.
That's the devil's advocate.
And it's the devil's advocate, but what I'm saying is it's again showing that in the decision making we want a decision, but in the thinking we want the diversity. We want to have the devil's advocate as part of our thinking, because it will bring us in a better way to truth or to a better decision. And I'd like to mention, you mentioned, Mark mentioned something else. You said the words, certain words which I don't remember, but you say them again, I'll say, yeah, it was those words. But let's look at the Sefer HaChinuch. We have it here in Hebrew, so I'll explain it in English. The Sefer HaChinuch is a book, very interesting. We're not actually 100% sure about who the author was 1,000 years ago, but he wrote a book, Chinuch, education, or Chinuch for his children. He wrote the book for his son and his son's friends, trying to make a list. There are several books, compilations of what are the 613 mitzvot of the Torah and different arguments about it. And he makes a list of the 613 mitzvot, and he brings basic knowledge about each one of the mitzvot, about the rules, halachot, and also on every mitzvah he says, Mi shorshei ha-mitzvah, the first words here, the roots of the mitzvah. What is the idea? Where is it coming from? Not what are the details. Where is it coming from? Where is it growing out of? But he never says the roots of the mitzvah. He always says, Mi shorshei. Meaning, I'm going to say what I think are maybe part of the roots of where the mitzvah is coming from. But you know what? Maybe somebody else is going to have a different explanation. It's not something that's explicit in the Torah. So when you have this command in Sefer Dvarim, that you come to the Sanhedrin and they make a decision, you have to accept it, and you should not deviate from it. He says the following: Mi shorshei ha-mitzvah, lefi shedeot bnei adam chalukin ze mizeh, lo yishtavu leolam harbe deot bedvarim. People have different opinions. They will never all have the same opinion. There will always be people with different opinions on different issues. V'yada Adon HaKol Baruch Hu, Creator of the world, the Master of the world, knew she'ilu tiyeh kavanat ketuvei HaTorah mesura biyad kol echad ve'echad mibnei adam ish kefi sichlo. If the intention of the Torah is put in the hands of every individual person, each one does what he thinks. יפרש כל אחד מהם את דברי התורה כפי סברתו, וירבה המחלוקת בישראל. Everyone will give his explanation. There will be a lot of disagreement, a lot of disputes in Israel במשמעות המצוות. What do the mitzvot mean? ותעשה התורה ככמה תורה. There will not be one Torah. There will be a lot of Torah. There will be 2 Jews, there will be 4 Torah. At least there will be 2 Jews, 2 Torah, and there won't be one Torah. Everybody will be carrying out the Torah the way they understand and they see fit, and there won't be one Torah. וכעניין שכתבתי במצוות אחרי רבים להטות בסדר משפטים, in Parashat Mishpatim coming up in 2.5 weeks, there is the commandment that we follow the majority, אחרי רבים להטות, אחרי רבים, we follow the majority. I wrote it there as well. ובכל דור ודור גם כן, שנשמע אל החכמים הנמצאים שקיבלו דבריהם, we have to adhere to the תלמידי חכמים of that generation, ושתו מים מספריהם, people who wrote books about Torah, and everybody has taken water, is drinking water from their books, from their knowledge of Torah. ויגעו כמה יגיעות בימים ובלילות להבין עומק מיליהם ופליאות דעותיהם. They spent many nights working hard trying to understand the Torah. So they are the people who are knowledgeable and understanding and have depth in their understanding of the Torah. So we adhere to their decisions. ועם ההסכמה הזאת, with agreeing on this in the nation, נכוון אל דרך האמת בידיעת התורה. We will do the true Torah. We will guide ourselves to carry out the Torah in a truthful way. So he's hinting here to the fact that if the Chachamim are those who are knowledgeable, are deep, have dedicated themselves to Torah, so they know better. So if we follow them, we will do what is truthful to do according to Torah. So he's saying we'll do the right thing, but that's not all. Then he continues to say something else. אמרו חכמינו זיכרונם לברכה, לא תסור ממנו ימין ושמאל. As we saw in the pasuk, you can't deviate right or left. אפילו יאמרו לך על ימין ושמאל. Even if they say to you, they tell you, you know this is right. They tell you that's left. You know this is left. They tell you that's right. Even when they do that, you are sure they're wrong. You don't think it's about opinions. You don't think that it's about interpretations. You think they are just black and white wrong. Nonetheless, you follow what they said. And he's saying it's not because they cannot make mistakes. They can make mistakes. Sanhedrin, the Chachamim, in the Sanhedrin or later generations, they're human. They can make mistakes. I'm opening, parentheses. There is a korban that is brought by the Beit Din, by the Sanhedrin, if they made a wrong decision and people performed the sin, not because they didn't follow the decision of the Sanhedrin, but because the Sanhedrin made a mistake and everybody else made a mistake. So it's not the people's fault. The Sanhedrin have to bring the korban. There are different details about that halakha, but they can make a mistake. But, says the Sefer HaChinuch, כלומר, שאפילו יהיו הם טועים בדבר אחד מן הדברים, אין ראוי לנו לחלוק עליהם, even if they're making a mistake on a certain decision. And I'm sure they're making a mistake, like my right is right and my left is left. We shouldn't disagree with them. We should adhere to their decision. אבל נעשה כטעותם, we will follow their mistake. Why? וטוב לי, this is what I what do you say? Underline, but I didn't underline it. And what?
Emphasize.
Emphasized. I bold emphasized. וטוב לסבול טעות אחת, ולא שיעשה כל אחד ואחד כפי דעתו. It's better that we suffer from one mistake, but not everyone do what he wants, what he thinks. Because if everyone does what he wants, בזה יהיה חורבן הדת. That will be the destruction of religion. וחילוק לב העם, the hearts of the people will be broken up because everyone will make a different decision. והפסד האומה לגמרי. It's loss for the nation. Meaning, it's important that the Torah is not an individualistic instruction. The Torah is an instruction for Am Yisrael. Am Yisrael has to follow it. If we are to perform the mission of Am Yisrael in the world, then as a nation, we have to follow the Torah. And we have to keep Shabbat. And we have to do all kinds of other things. And we have to do it as a nation. And if everybody makes his and her own individual decisions in the Torah, I'll do it this way, I'll do it that way, we will not function as a nation. Now, maybe the Sanhedrin is making a mistake. But if we say, if everyone decides on his own, when the Sanhedrin, it's black and white, it's right and left, it's clear that they're making a mistake, I'm going to do something different, we're not going to be able to retain functioning of a nation that's fulfilling the Torah. Everybody's going to do their own thing. So it's better, it's a loss, and it's going to be something, there's going to be some damage, but at the same time, it's better to accept one mistake that they're making and to keep Am Yisrael as a nation that's fulfilling the Torah. So that's why you have this. It's not only about going against the court or other things, it's also about keeping the nation functioning as a functioning nation, fulfilling the Torah. So this will sum up what I have to say about this at this point. It's important, even though there's room for diversity, it's important to keep together as a nation fulfilling the Torah. And I'll give you an example, a very practical example. We created a kehillah. It's a little different than many other Orthodox kehlot. And maybe if it was only an individualistic thing, and sometimes people try to encourage us, or more than encourage, try to put pressure on us that we should go further than where we're going until now. We should do more about this or about that, about different things. But it's not what's commonly accepted in Orthodox circles. So there are things that we do that are not generally accepted in Orthodox circles, but we're careful to do things that have reasoning and logic and sources and are based on, halachic sources and so on. And even if something is based on halachic sources, and we can claim that it is, we draw a line at a certain point where we feel that it's not right now at this time acceptable in the society, in Orthodox society in Israel. I would say we are trying to push what would the term be? The boundary, yes, to push the boundaries, but we don't want to do our own thing, be a very happy number of people and a community that's doing their own thing, and we don't care about the Jewish world. We're very happy to worship Hashem the way that we see fit, but we're going to lose being part of Am Yisrael, part of Am Yisrael that adheres to the halakha in its, or at least the traditional Orthodox halakha. So we pushed up to a point and we restrict ourselves, not because someone is threatening us. If you take one more step, we're going to do something to you, but because we feel that it's right to push the boundaries a little bit, but not to go too far where we lose this unity of being Am Yisrael that's worshiping Hashem together. Which is, again, I think I've mentioned this in the past, which is why if, for instance, there's a decision about I may not like certain institutions of religion in the state of Israel. Take away the word may. Some of the institutions of religion in the state of Israel, I'm not fond of them. I don't think they're doing a great job. Not because I'm not fond, I don't like Torah, because sometimes I think they're about politics, not about Torah. But if they make a decision about the date when a certain Chag will be in Am Yisrael, no way we are going to argue about that. We cannot have Am Yisrael celebrating a certain Chag at two different times because we have a disagreement. We will have to accept the formal authorities' decision about that. You cannot function as a nation keeping the Torah if one of us celebrates Yom Kippur on Monday and the other one celebrates Yom Kippur on Tuesday. You can't function that way. So if I think it should be Tuesday and they say Monday, I'm going to accept that it's Monday. Because you can't have two different parts of Am Yisrael in that sense. There are certainly places where we can have diversity within halakha. And if one community does things one way and another community does things a different way, we can and we should have different communities, which also means there should be some communities who are more right, more left, whatever you want to call it, more forward, more backward than our community, because it's okay. There's supposed to be different communities in Am Yisrael. That's okay. But within a certain joint framework that we should be keeping. So again, there's a certain aspect of action being less diverse. There's room for diversity, but putting a limit on it, and in discussion and talking about it and writing articles about it and discussing it with different people, that can be even more diverse than where the actions are. The thinking and the discussions can be more diverse. The actions have to create a certain, more of a limit than the discussions. By the way, in Tefillin, Tefillin Shel Rosh, how many compartments does it have? 4. Tefillin Shel Yad, 1. You have 4 sections of the Torah in the Tefillin. And Tefillin Shel Rosh, they are separated to 4 different pieces of cloth, like a small Sefer Torah, in 4 different compartments. Tefillin Shaliah, they are on one parchment, 1, 2, 3, 4, all written one after the other. Sorry, 1, 2, 3, 4 from right to left, all written on the same parchment in one compartment. And part of the possible message of that is in your head. You can have different compartments, you can have different opinions, you can have different ideas. In action, there has to be something which there's more unity in the action than in the head. The head can be more diverse than the actions. The thoughts can be more diverse than the actions. Okay, reactions? Reactions?
How can you explain that way? If we follow the halakha and we are different kind of community from Haredi to all the kind of community inside the halakha. But how can we explain that all of those community don't are not let's say friends with the other communities? Because in that case, if everyone understands well the halakha, we understand that we want to do it in that way because we follow the halakha, but we decided to do in a certain way, and in another community we decided to do it in another way, but with the same boundaries of the halakha. So why there is all those? How can we explain all those tension, but differences?
It's more than tensions. It's even more than tensions. And Natael is asking if this description is true. So why is it that very often different communities with different boundaries don't treat one another respectfully and don't have this kind of attitude that it's okay, that we can do things our way, you can do things your way. There's a certain joint framework and there's a variety. And I would say, why is it that this is not the way people treat one another? And I think it's very similar to the idea of what was going on in the state of Israel, which I totally object to on both extremes of the argument going on before the war started, because put it this way, there's a high court where there's someone who has to make decisions in the state. And in a state, we also have to accept that there's a high authority, and we have to accept something that we're not agreeing with, and so on. And the same things I said before, you can continue to teach, and you can argue, and you can go and try to convince members of the court or of the Knesset, that they should do things differently. But the argument was, because we have a certain balance of power, which one overrides and what's more important? Do we all have to accept what the Knesset says, even if the judges think otherwise? Do we all have to accept what the judges say, even if the Knesset says otherwise? Have the judges been given that authority by the Knesset, or did they steal it from somewhere and make it up for themselves? And then we won't accept what the judges are doing. So that was the big tension, because there were different opinions, but they weren't trying. There were many groups of people disagreeing and discussing with one another, and they brought different ideas and different suggestions, very detailed suggestions, to the president, to the politicians, to the judges, to make something that is not going to totally please either extreme, but that we can all live with. And I'm not going to say now whose fault it is. I'm not even sure. You ask A, he'll say it's B. You ask B, he'll say it's A. But they just were not accepted. They weren't willing to come together to do this. One of our great fear with the unity in the time of the war, our great fear is what happens after the war. You hear this from many bereaved families, that this is what they're saying. Our family member sacrificed himself. He wanted the unity. He wants what's best for Am Yisrael. Don't go back to that fighting. So it's there as well. It happens within the religious community as well. And I will say one thing that I can understand, and one thing that I'd like to move on to the next source and then say it after that. One thing I can understand is everyone has a certain place where they draw the line. I will draw the line when it's not, when it's not based in halakha. Certain things, the way Reform thinking goes is it's not the right thing for us today. It doesn't go look for a halachic discussion. Within the conservative world, there's more of a halachic discussion. There are some differences. We have to discuss the details to say, and we said we would. We said that one of the things we'll discuss in the future is what about different denominations within Judaism? I said Orthodox. What is my attitude? What should be? What attitudes are there? What possibilities are there relating to other other groups, other Jewish groups. But everybody's going to draw a line at some point. So, it's easy to say to someone else, you drew the line and kept me out. And I think that's a wrong decision, but I also do that to someone else. So we all have to make decisions within the state as well, within the Sanhedrin, within all kinds of things. We all do that about different issues. I just think that for the benefit of the nation, that's what I was quoting from Sefer HaChinuch. We have to function together as a nation keeping the Torah. That's a religious belief. But once you believe in religion, I think that's a national religion. It's inevitable that it's a national religious belief if you believe in religion. And if you don't believe in religion, or you do or don't, either way, if you support the state, same is true about the state. We have to retain a national functionality. We can't go on fighting about everything like this. We have to create methods that we can function as a nation and be able to discuss and argue and be diverse and reach decisions together. Otherwise, it's not a question of you're right, more right, and I'm more right. We're not going to function. We're going to fall apart. Same is true about religion. The same is true about the state. And I would like to add something to that. And for that, I'd like to move on to another source. And that would be here, the Gemara in Masechet Chagiga and the Maharal about it. We've quoted this Gemara in the past. The Pasuk in Kohelet, here you have it in Hebrew. I didn't underline, I bolded, boldly emphasized the words Baalei Asupot. I would also emphasize the words Masmerot Metuim. But let's look at it in English. This is a Gemara in Masechet Chagiga. We've seen it in the past. I'm going to focus on something specific, two specific points today. Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah expounded the following verse. The words of the wise are as goads. We said before, Eliezer, goads are spurs, yes? And as nails well planted are the words of the masters of assemblies, which are given from one shepherd. The first thing I'd like to point out is that nails are not generally planted. Nails are nailed and plants are planted. Just using the term nails well planted is what would you call it? Oxymoron. It doesn't seem to make sense. If you plant a nail, you're not going to grow a nail tree. And if you hammer in a plant, you're going to kill it. So what is it? Nails that are being planted. And because of this, the expounding or the drasha of Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah is going to say, well, that's Judaism. It has an aspect of a nail. You knock it in, that's it. It's there for good. It's not going anywhere. It's stuck. It is the way it is. No flexibility about it. And there's an aspect of Judaism that is like a plant that is changing, is growing. There's something new growing from the roots of the same plant. And that is Torah shebichtav and Torah shebal peh, the written Torah, which is like a nail, the oral Torah, which is like a plant or something growing. And because of these two aspects of Judaism, the advantage of it is that if you have a religion that is very strict and is only exactly the way it was, you are going to be found in a museum in archaeology somewhere. You're not going to be able to live when the world evolves and grows. So you have to have an aspect of growth like a plant in order to grow and change with the world that's changing. If you only have the aspect of a plant, you're going to be something, but it will lose its contact with what the origin of this religion or nation was. And the uniqueness, or part of the uniqueness of Judaism, is that it has an aspect of a nail and it has an aspect of a plant. That it can keep connection with its original form, roots, and yet grow new growths from those roots. But because of this, especially with Jews, we're going to have arguments. Should the nail be strengthened? Should the plant be strengthened? Is it within the perimeters that the nail allows us? Or have you gone way off with the plant, growing something new that disconnected from the original roots? We will always have arguments about this. This is part of this drasha here, and you can see it. Why a goad? It guides us. If a goad is movable, maybe the words of the Torah are movable. No, it says nails. But if you think that the nail does not increase, the words of the Torah are like a plant. They will grow new things. That's one aspect I'd like to point out today. The other aspect is the words that I boldly emphasized, the masters of assemblies. This, says Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, is the Talmidei Chachamim, the rabbis. They are why are they called masters of assemblies? They should be called masters of wisdom, of Torah, of knowledge. Why are they called masters of assemblies? So the Drasha says the following. We're over here. The master, starting with the words, the masters of assemblies. These are the Talmidei Chachamim, disciples of the wise, who sit in manifold assemblies and occupy themselves with the Torah. Some pronounce impure and others pronouncing pure. Some prohibiting and others permitting. Some disqualifying and others declaring fit. There are going to be arguments because we have nails and we have plans and we have to find the right combination. We're going to have arguments. Is this impure because it's not in accordance with the nail? Or is it pure because it's a new plant growing, it's a new fruit growing from the same plant? Is it prohibited because it doesn't fit with the nail? Or is it permissible because it's something new growing on the plant? Some disqualified, others declare it fit. But the point is that these Talmidei Chachamim who disagree on these issues, what are they doing? They're assembling. They're not creating separate keilot, separate yeshivot, separate courts. Each one has his court. And they are making their own decisions without hearing the other opinion and then disrespecting, what would the word be, denouncing or condemning other courts or other communities. They're sitting together, they're discussing with one another, they're making an assembly. And this is something that we've lost. We have different rabbis, each one in their own circles, discussing with the same-minded or likely-minded people, and not discussing with the people they disagree with. The same is with right and left, and those who support the court, and those who support the Knesset. It's all that everybody's gathering within only the people that are agreeing with him. We're not assembling the different opinions together. And that's the idea of this drasha. The Talmidei Chachamim are masters of assemblies. They assemble together. They come together. They discuss the Torah together. Then you're going to say, okay, but what do I do? How do I keep the Torah? And then the drasha says they're all given from one shepherd. Go back to the pasuk at the beginning. These are nails well planted, are the words of masters of assemblies, which are given from one shepherd. They're given from one shepherd, from one God. They're given by Hashem. If we all believe in the Torah and try to carry it out, and we disagree about it, we'll discuss, and we'll hear one another, and then we have to make decisions. And then the Maharal, which once again, I'm sorry, I'm taking the English speakers back to Hebrew, but I did not find this source in English. I'm sure someone has translated at least some of the Maharal to English, but I couldn't find it on the computer online. So the Maharal is going to explain the term Balei Supot, masters of assemblies. And he says the following. Balei Supot, Perush, כי אי אפשר שידע את החכמים על דרך אחד, ואי אפשר שלא יהיה חילוק ביניהם כפי מה שהם מחולקים בשכלם. It's impossible that the rabbis will not have different opinions. They have different minds, different thoughts, different ways of thinking. Of course, they're going to have disagreements. כי כל דבר ודבר. Why do they have disagreements? If you remember, the Rambam at one point said, because not everybody, if people use logic, they're going to reach the same decision. The Maharal is saying just the opposite. Why do they have disagreements? Not because someone is thinking crooked. כי כל דבר ודבר אי אפשר שלא יהיה בחינה יותר מאחת לדבר אחד. Everything has different aspects to it. שאף אם הדבר טמא, even if the Torah says about something that it's impure, אי אפשר שלא יהיה לו צד בחינה אל טהרה של מה. וכן אם הדבר טהור, אי אפשר שלא יהיה לו בחינה מה של טומאה. Even if the Torah explicitly says about something that it's impure, it has aspects of purity. And if the Torah says something is pure, it has aspects of impurity. ובני אדם מחולקים בשכל, and then what happens is different people, one picks up on the aspect of purity, and one notices the aspect of impurity, and it's like, the two people standing on the two sides of a number written on the floor between them, and one says it's a 6, the other one says it's a 9, right? That you take a ball, and one side of it is black and one side of it is white, and two people looking at it, one says it's white, one says it's black. They're both right. They're both wrong because neither of them sees the full picture. But each one's perspective has truth to it, has an aspect of the complete truth to it. That's what he's saying, what the Maharal is saying, that everything in Torah has different sides to it. So when one says pure and one says impure, when one says, well, this is deviating from the nails, from the strict framework of the written Torah, there's truth to that. Should we deviate or shouldn't we? We should take that into consideration. Maybe we're moving too far away from the original framework of the written Torah. The other one is saying, no, but it's growing from the roots of the Torah, from the oral Torah. And we have, here, I'll show you the sources and how we can derive it from the sources. And it's a new fruit growing on the plant of the Torah. There's truth to that as well. It's not, neither one of them is all right or all wrong. Neither one of them is all wrong, and neither one of them is totally right if he doesn't take into consideration the other opinion. And because of that, says the Maharal, that's why they are called Baalei Asupot, masters of assembly. Because if you want to realize and understand and take into account all the different aspects of the issue, you sit with yourself, you only know what you think. You sit with someone who disagrees with you, you can take into account the opposite opinion. You can think about it. You can take it into consideration. And then your decision is going to be wiser and more well-rounded than if you just think what you think, then discuss it with other people who think the same thing that you think, and then think you've made a wise decision. The decision is going to be wiser. It all comes from Hashem. And Maharal even says, goes on to other things he said in the world, also in the physical world, is something hard or soft. Is everything either hard or soft? Some things are harder, some things are softer, some things are more watery, some things are more, he talks about the different elements of the physical existence. It can have more air, more water, more earth. Everything is made up of different things and with different balances between them. And then he says in the last paragraph, halakha lema'aseh, when we have to make a halachic decision, going back to decisions, one side is stronger than the other. So we decide pure or we decide impure, because the purity is stronger than the impurity. It's a little bit closer to the strict aspects of the written Torah. So even though there's truth that you can derive it from the oral Torah, don't do it because it's deviating too much from the written Torah. Or the opposite, it does deviate a little bit from the written Torah, but there are sources for it in the oral Torah, and therefore you can make the decision. Go ahead, make that decision. So it's true that there are different aspects. One of them is stronger than the other. That's what decides what the halakha will be. But in order to make a proper halakhic decision, you have to hear both sides. So this is saying even to reach decisions where there maybe will be less diversity, you have to have the diversity of opinions because there is truth, partial truth in each one of the opinions. And only by bringing them together, by assembling them together, are you going to have all the considerations that you need to make the best halachic decision. And he says that this is the drasha of Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah in the Gemara. That's why the pasuk that he's discussing says Baalei Asupot. Why is it saying Baalei Asupot? His interpretation or his well, there must be a good word in English. What? It's not exactly analysis, it's more expounding.
Collections.
His expoundation of it, or whatever. Expanding of it. It's what he sees in it. What he sees in the words Baalei Asupot, not necessarily this is the literal meaning of the words in the pasuk, but what he sees in it is the gathering, the assembly. You have to assemble, you have to gather the different aspects in order to make a good halachic decision. Yes, there are going to be new questions. Yes, there will be disagreements about it. Yes, there is truth, some truth, partial truth in the different opinions. You have to bring the chachamim together so that by bringing the chachamim together, you're assembling the different considerations, and then you can only then can you make a good halachic decision. Michael.
So let's say you've got good court with good judges and they have gone through this process and expounded and considered the different opinions and they all agree and it's unanimous. You still rule the other way?
That's a good question. First of all, it's only what I said before is only about dinei nefashot. And it sounds very extreme. And I asked myself the same question. I'm not sure what the answer is. If they had a lengthy discussion and discussed all the ipcha mistabras and brought up all the reasonings why he should be acquitted, and yet each one separately reached that decision, and they even bring different. I remember the Gemara raising this idea that if they all said the same decision because of the same reasoning, then something is missing here.
It's only a death penalty.
Yeah, yeah. But
Maybe because you can't go back.
yeah, but clearly they're saying something about there wasn't the due process, the due thinking process. But I don't remember what the Gemara said about it or the commentators, but I do remember that there was this discussion about this, that is it different when the different judges reach the same decision, but for different reasons. So they all went through a thought process and reached a decision. It's not that somebody said at the beginning, for example, another thing in Sanhedrin is you have someone who's considered the greatest rabbi, and you have those who are lower, considered less, they're called the big ones and the little ones. Katan vegadol. And potchim min katan, you begin the discussion with the small one, with the new guy, the less experienced, the less knowledgeable, whatever it is. And why? Because if the big guy says his opinion, then everybody else is going to be afraid to disagree. So you dafka start from the little guy, so that everybody raises their opinions, and then there will be a lot of considerations to consider. So again, it could be that there was a discussion and everybody, for all kinds of different reasons, reached the same conclusion. I'm not sure what this decision is there, but I understand the logic of what you're raising.
Discussion.
Yeah.
What happens? I mean, you said, and I understand why. You said that if the decision is made, even if it's the wrong decision, you still have to follow it. That's understandable because that's the meaning of authority. Okay, but we're human. We made a mistake. Now, if we make a mistake and it's not corrected, it compounds itself over time. How does this mistake get corrected?
First of all, as I said, there is a halacha in the written Torah and in the oral Torah. Mark is asking, okay, if there's a mistake, we still have to adhere to it because there has to be authority and there has to be the state needs, or the religion needs to function. But the mistake can then grow and cause more damage. So how do we correct the mistake? Well, first of all, the Torah does discuss the written Torah and oral Torah, that as I said, a sacrifice that the Sanhedrin has to bring in such a case, meaning sometime down the road, someone discovered and convinced them and showed them, and they agreed that they made a mistake, and then they'll bring the sacrifice.
Right.
So there has to be some kind of process in place, and that would be that other sages came along and convinced them and showed them, and they ended up being convinced that sure enough they were wrong. I don't see any other way of doing it. I don't know of a historical event where it actually happened. Not that I'm saying it never did. I'm not aware of a description of anything like that historically happening. And I would say it's one of the things that's extremely crucial for things like this to happen is that those leading authorities have to be attentive to criticism. Because if they're not attentive to criticism, they're never going to admit they're making a mistake. They're not going to admit. There's a person who's aware that he made a mistake, but he's not willing to admit it. They're not going to admit to themselves. They're not going to be ready to consider the possibility that they're making a mistake. And I think that is part of one of the main problems with what's, again, before the war, the argument that was going on, because of certain people on either sides who there was no talking about anything. There's no room for any discussion about anything. And then you can't discover mistakes. So I think that's the root of being able to stop where mistakes are going down and moving forward. But at the same time, I will once again strengthen what the Sefer HaChinuch says, even though if a mistake is it's there and it's like a nail without a head, it's in there and no one can take it out anymore, it's still worse if everyone makes his decision where that nail without a head is and does his own thing, because then we can't function at all.
So that's why there has to be a dissenting opinion. Because there's always the possibility that a mistake is made.
I agree.
So there has to be a dissenting.
It has to be a dissenting opinion. I agree. Yeah. Not only that, according to the Maharal that we just saw, it's necessary to have the full, to consider all of the considerations, all the things that should be taken into consideration.
So by definition, in my mind, the master of assemblies is somebody who is so skilled at bringing people together that you can wind up with one structure at the end. And I don't know that we have that today.
Exactly. It's not popular. It's not being able to assemble different things is not something that wins elections.
No, but that's exactly what's happening here, right? There's a discussion, and we come to a conclusion, but there is a discussion. And I, like good friend Michael, and occasionally agreed on the bus, but we also occasionally disagreed. So we had different opinions, but you can, I think we came to the conclusion that more things unite us than divide us.
Yeah, we have to keep on. Not only that, we have to give it energies, proactive energies to the things that unite us, and not spend all of our or so much of our energies on the things that divide us. Because then we forget about the things that unite us. We have to give them energy. And and then what will end up happening is the pendulum is going to fly to the other extreme. And we're not going to be able to discuss anything because we're going to be afraid that any discussion is going to tear us apart.
It's very interesting that in this discussion, all of the diversity in the Jewish world, we're really talking about serious differences of opinion and different points of view, different interpretations, perhaps, of the Torah. In the secular world, the non-Jewish world, everything, all diversity is all about superficialities, how people look, what religion they're.
On a certain level, I think I'd like to give you an example from Israel. I think even though things are presented very superficially, they are nonetheless the tip of the iceberg of values. They're not presented as values. Maybe not only everybody understands that they are values. I want to give an example. I think we can easily agree that freedom of human beings, people being free, is a value, positive value. If you are voting in the elections, for example, in the state of Israel, you can be thinking of two different freedoms that you're voting for. You can vote for the freedom of the Jews who have not been free for so long and have to take measures to retain and guard and safeguard their freedom. We finally have freedom. We have to take active steps to make sure that we safeguard our freedom. And if that means that it will infringe on some other people's freedoms, still we have to take steps to safeguard our freedom. There are other people whose decision in the elections will be, we have freedom. There are other people who live in our state who don't have freedom. We have to give them freedom. I'm going to go vote for the party who's going to give them freedom. We're all thinking about freedom, and we're making opposite decisions and voting for conflicting political parties and opinions.
Right.
And we lose sight of the fact that we're both looking at a value and trying to find the balance between two different aspects of that very same value. And what we lose sight of is if you're voting for them, you're all bad. And if you're voting for them, you're all bad. And we're not even discussing the topic that is making us vote for these different political parties. And I think that that's a tragedy. And again, if we noticed that what we are united about, it will be easier for us to discuss what we disagree upon. And sometimes it's the very same thing. We're united about something that's very important, and we disagree about how to do it. And we don't even see that we have a common denominator. We're just going at one another's throats like it's all out, life and death, right now. And maybe if we could see the common denominator, we could would be easier for us to discuss the differences. Or we have to give energies to that common denominator. And we don't want them coming from someone else going to starting a war against us.
You also have to demand a certain level of how people are going to behave with each other so that you can even have a discussion.
Absolutely.
That's the word, that's the assemblies.
They have to be able to assemble with one another. Yes. Not just to be there physically and yell at one another, to be able to assemble in some kind of reasonable form of behavior.
To me, that's the big problem today when we're talking about our friends on the other side of the Great Line.
Oh, sure.
I have to go. Bye.
Sorry.
I have to go. Good night.
But
You know,
but I would say it's up to us, the citizens, not to vote for the opinion that we agree with when he doesn't know how to assemble, but to vote for someone who assembles better, even if we don't 100% agree with him, because that's right now much more important. That will weigh more in my decision who to vote for than exactly whose opinion do I agree with. That's my opinion. Laila Tov.
Thank you.
Tודה רבה. Sorry I couldn't hear you. Oh, now I see that there are things on the chat. Good time to notice it.
all right, what's in the chat?